Good evening, fellow Blades, and welcome to my usual pre-match ramblings in the lead up to tomorrow's game against Reading, and on the back of a fine win over Middlesbrough on Wednesday night. We're sort of taking a bit around the ground when we get the chance this season, and the weather's good today, it's not freezing. So we've come up to, in my opinion, the best view in Bramall Lane, which, considering it's the press box, it probably should be. So we're right on the roof of the South Stand. The only place you can get that's higher in Bramall Lane is when you walk out across the roof itself up to the wall where the floodlights are, the metal wall, and you sort of lean over and peer onto the pitch. I'm terrified of heights. In actual fact, this stand is the reason. When it was under construction, so the 1973-74 time, the company my dad worked for was a company called Cooper and Turner in Sheffield, and they supplied all the nuts and bolts that hold this stand together like a Meccano kit. And Dad was site foreman at one point, and he used to like to bring me down here on a Sunday so he could sort of have a sly look at what was going on and get on the roof and see this wonderful brand new stand rising over Bramall Lane. And he loved bringing me down. And I can remember being brought, and I was sat on the very back row of seats while he came up to do some inspection work up here, reading me copy of shoot. And Dad came down and said, "Do you want to have a look on the roof?" Yeah, all right then. So I remember walking up the ladders, because none of the staircases that we get access for today were here then, just didn't exist. You know, ladders with platforms and they're all roped off. And he was behind me and I kept going up, it seemed forever. And then I walked out across the roof. Now today when you do it, it's got a wooden walkway and it's against health and safety to take people out there as you'd expect. But I can remember walking out and Dad sort of going, "Don't go too near thee." And I got to the very edge. Now these days there's like I say, a metal wall that the floodlights are fixed to. Those days there wasn't anything, and all I can remember is looking over and seeing the pitch looming up towards me and sort of wobbling, and Dad grabbing me, and I just remember being dragged back down by Dad and waking up downstairs with a thick ear and some very wet trousers. And I always think it's one of the reasons I'm terrified of heights is the South Stand at Bramall Lane, the Tony Curry stand. But there you go, a little bit of a story about up here. Today, still thinking of players who represented both. Obviously, connections always with Reading. Ian Porterfield, of course, that successfully managed the Blades to the 4th Division Championship in 81-82. Had a period as Reading manager when they were at Elm Park. And it's a ground that I've been to on many, many occasions. I'm sure most of us have. But a player that sticks out in my mind is one of the great Victorian players of this football club. A player called Tommy Morren. Now, Morren was a Middlesbrough lad, funnily enough. Links quite well with the game the other night. And he played at amateur level for the best clubs in Middlesbrough and Teesside. So he played for Middlesbrough Ionopolis, Middlesbrough FC. In fact, I think he's still one of the only players to win an amateur cup winners medal with Middlesbrough in 1895 and an FA Cup winners medal, which he won with Sheffield United in 1899 against Derby. Now he's regarded as one of the best players of his time as an amateur. But the captain of Borough, can't remember his name, but he was seduced to go and join Reading, which at that time was in the Southern League and paying big, big wages. And he's obviously gone down to Reading, liked what he saw, told Tommy Morren how good it was, and Reading made an inquiry to sign Tommy. And he decided he was going to become a pro. Now, our coach at that time was a man called George Waller. And George Waller was born in Pittsmoor. And he was a great all-round sportsman. George played for our neighbours Wednesday in the 1890 Cup final against Blackburn Rovers. Couldn't have done very well because he lost 6-0. But he also played for Yorkshire at cricket, and from the club being formed, from Sheffield United being formed, he was seen as being a good player to try and get on board because he was a Sheffield lad. He'd been around football in its early infancy years really in the city, or the towns it would have been then. So eventually they persuaded Waller to sign. Now it'd be fair to say I think he was coming to the end of his career at that point. He spent most of his time at Sheffield United playing in the reserves, I think probably one first team appearance. But Waller, big influence. He became player coach, probably the first player coach, and by that I mean the man that ran out on the pitch with his wet sponge and his 10 Woodbine and his leather bag to see if a player was all right. And what fascinated me, we found out where he was buried, and George Waller's buried in Burngreaves Cemetery, just like Fatty Folks, and his grave's well out of the way. It's at the back on a wall. And what fascinated me was reading the gravestone. It became clear that firstly, his wife, or his first wife, had died in childbirth in about 1893. Which wasn't uncommon, of course, in those days. But what was even more startling was that 6 months or so after, the baby died, so died in infancy. And don't forget, we're a top-flight football club at that point, in every sense of the word. He's the player coach. And imagine what will that get the press these days if player coach for a Premier League side, wife died in childbirth and then the child died soon after. Incredible to think they were left with those responsibilities to have a career as a football player back then and bring a family up. But Waller had a spell playing for Middlesbrough and he would have played out alongside Tommy Morren. And Waller was aware of the fact this cracking defender was on his way to sign for another club and they'd be changing trains in Sheffield. And he told the board of directors about it. They said, yep, we'd be interested in him, go and see what you can do. So legend has it that when Tommy Morren's train stopped in Sheffield for him to change, he was waylaid on the train by Mr. Waller and another couple of club officials. But he was adamant he was going to red him. So George Waller kidnapped his bag off the train and Tommy Morren chased him down the platform trying to get it out, get it off him, and saw the train disappearing in a puff of smoke, as you would then. So to make up for it, they took him down to the Bull and Mouth pub on the corner of Waingate, near where the markets used to be, opposite Ladies Bridge, to buy him a drink while the next train came. And legend again has it that they got a few beers down him. By the time he'd had a few beers and a few whiskies, he thought it was a great idea to sign for the Blades, and we got his signature. And it proved to be a wise signing. Morren for Sheffield United played a huge part in every early major trophy that we won. So he was a key member of the 1897-98 League Championship winning side. One of the players who became the winning side of the first ever Sheriff Shield, the forerunner of the Charity Shield. He played in the 1899 FA Cup final victory over Derby County. He played in 1901 when we lost to Spurs, but unfortunately he was injured for the 1902 final against Southampton. But an amazing career with Sheffield United. When his first team years were over, he played a big part captaining the reserves to quite a few victories as well. And he's a very famous photograph. We are still so far, I believe, the only top flight football team to field a team of 11 full England internationals. In fact, on the picture, the only one who's not an England international at the back is Tommy Boyle, the Irish fullback. He was obviously quite a shrewd bloke because during his time at Sheffield United, he lived in a little house on Abbeydale Road. It's still there today, and when you walk past it, it's a little terraced house. Often wonder if the people living in there ever imagined the England cap and FA Cup winners' medals and stuff like that was contained within those four walls at one bit. It's incredible. He moved on. When he finished playing for us, he had a brief spell at Leeds City in its very, very infant stages, long before it was wound up and the Leeds United that we know today was formed out of it. But he also had a newsagent shop, and that was at Hunter's Bar. Shop's still there today, just at the top of Sharravale Road. So he'd obviously got a bit of nous about him. He tried to open a business and make sure he got an income after. He had two daughters, and then later on in life he had a son. Now, interestingly enough, a few years ago we got contact from the daughter of the son, his granddaughter, and she was trying to find out information on grandfather because Dad never talked about him. And I went up to meet her. She lived in the northeast, and it turned out that I don't think he'd been a particularly good father from what the son thought, whether he was aggressive. I know he was a bit of a drinker, but he died in 1926, so Dad wouldn't have been very old then. And it seems that he didn't really want to talk about him, so read into that what you will. But when the mother died, the two daughters, they were maiden aunts as you'd call, neither of them ever married. They moved up and they bought a sweet shop in Whitby, and they had that sweet shop for years, and in fact both of them lived to good ages, well into the 1980s, and she can remember going to the sweet shop. Her dad worked for the BBC on the wirelesses, going out doing the testing stations and the masts. But when the last of the maiden aunts died, she was left this shoebox, and she wanted to talk to me about this shoebox. And she said, I've never really looked in it, I don't know a lot about what's in it, it went in a wardrobe 30 years ago, it's been there ever since. And I went up to meet her, and the experience of when she got the shoebox out of the wardrobe I can only describe as being, in a footballing sense, what Howard Carter must have seen when he broke the seal on Tutankhamun's tomb and sort of looked through the gloom and the dust. So all these Egyptian gold pieces laid out there have been there for thousands of years. When I lifted the top of this shoebox, there was virtually everything in there that Morren had ever won as a football player. So going back to the early 1890s, there were Middlesbrough junior shirt badges, which were wonderful. There were the normal gold medals that you'd find for local competitions. There was an amateur cup winners medal in there as well with Borough, which is wonderful. But then, of course, there is Sheffield United winning medals. So you've got his League Championship medal, his 1899 FA Cup winners medal, his Cup runners-up medal, his only England cap. He won an England cap against Ireland, 1898-99, I believe. Never played for England ever again, and I don't think it wasn't good enough, but it's been quite well minuted in our board ledgers of that sort of time that he would often turn an England call-up down to play for his football club, so he put club over country. Also he played for the Football League, which was the sort of creme de la creme, not just of the English players, of any player playing in the English Football League, and they played games against Scotland, Wales, Ireland, and it was seen as a sort of kind of lesser international, and he got a really, really beautiful gold medal for doing that. As I say, he died in 1926. He's buried up in Ecclesall churchyard. When I first found his grave, it took some finding. There's no family visited it for years. In all fairness, it's in a really, really poor state. And it goes back to this idea of a project I've had for a long, long time. I know where a lot of these great pioneers of the Blades and Sheffield football's last resting places are. And I think it'd be a great thing for the club and the fans, the supporters clubs, to get together and work on that, to put them back into some form of, what we're looking for really, a semblance, because they're all disintegrating now. It's over a century ago. Put him right, but he's buried up there with a couple of other Sheffield United players. But all these things were in a shoebox, and it was great for me to be able to collect the Dr. Dots and start talking to her about her illustrious grandfather. We can't change the past. We don't know what he was like as a parent to the kids, or a husband to the wife. It's something we can only speculate on. But all I'm aware of the fact that this great football player's life was in a little shoebox that had been in a wardrobe for 30 years, and she was generally worried that if something didn't happen with it, then her kids weren't interested. They had no idea who he was, and she thought, if anything happens to me and this house is cleared, this could go in an auction, it could go in a skip, anything could happen to it. So as a result of that conversation, we were lucky enough with one of our patrons, the wonderful Don Dickinson at Dendale, to secure the entire collection, which is on display to this day in the Dendale cabinet in the Legends of the Lane Museum. I always say, if you ever want to see these fabulous collections, we run a ground tour every Saturday when we kick off at 3 o'clock. Starts at 10 to 1 from the museum, and you take in the museum, everything's in there, behind the scenes, pitch side, and we give you a history lesson on Bramall Lane. It's only £6 for adults, and it's £4 for concessions, and we're sold out every game. So if you fancy doing one of those, check the remaining fixtures on a Saturday and contact the ticket office when they go on sale. It's normally about 2 weeks before, and you can find out a bit more for yourselves about people like Tommy Morren, Bill Foulkes, all that great era of football, because the things that they won on behalf of Sheffield United Football Club are there preserved for all to see. That's a little bit about the game tomorrow. I hope you enjoy it. Strange to think all those years ago we stopped Tommy Morren from being a Royals player, and you wonder what would have happened if he'd been a Royal. He certainly wouldn't have won the FA Cup in 1899. But a little player, 5'4" I think, Tommy Morren, who played a huge part in the change of this football club. Before we go, just another thing I remembered, in that collection was a menu. You don't see many menus, people throw them away, but it's the menu for the banquet, commemorate the winning of the 1899 FA Cup. And I'd love to tell you it happened the following week after the game, but it didn't. For some reason, it took place at the Cutler's Hall in September, so they'd had a fair old chance to reflect on the win at that point. But I love it because he took the time to pick it up off the table. You want to see some of the food on there, it's incredible. Fold it, put it in his pocket and take it home. And all those years later, it's in the museum, so we can all find out how the players were treated by the board of directors when we won our first FA Cup. On behalf of everybody at the football club, enjoy yourselves at the game tomorrow. Hope the weather's like this, and we'll speak to you again very soon.